Our story begins at the Eastern Gate training ground, where two people having a practice duel, where a man named Visaka gets defeated 5 times in a row by the sword saint, Godefried. All of this is being watched by main character, Il, who is a trainee in the Eastern Gate City Guard. Il's friend, Rui, is a guard from Unit 11. He loves talking about the matches with Il. This time too, Rui is very excited because Visaka, who was always so full of himself, got defeated so easily. But on the other hand, Il does not understand why a sword saint like Godefried is training with such low-ranking guards. Rui says it must be because of the war, as many squads have been appearing more often lately. There are also dangerous people called the Night Dwellers, who are very scary because they can use ancient magic. Il is surprised and asks whether that magic was not lost hundreds of years ago. Rui then says that maybe it is a curse on all of them. Suddenly, while they are talking, the vice captain of the Eastern Central Guard, Talion, arrives and starts praising the sword saint. But the sword saint does not accept the praise. He believes he is just a commoner like everyone else, so he does not feel comfortable being praised like that. But Talion keeps praising him, saying Godefried earned his rank with his own sword, making him an inspiration to everyone. Seeing all of this, Il starts copying Vice Captain Talion. As soon as Il starts mimicking him, Rui cannot stop laughing. He tries to hold back his laughter while telling Il to stop, or Talion will notice them. Il does not pay attention and keeps copying him. But, as expected, Talion walks over and tells Il to fight the sword saint. Hearing that, Il is left stunned and asks if Talion is joking. But Talion simply tells Il to go. Il steps in front of the sword saint. Seeing Il, the sword saint looks confused because Il is standing with a hunched back. On top of that, his stomach sticks out, making him look completely weak. Il awkwardly asks the sword saint to go easy on him, but the sword saint has no intention of holding back and rushes toward Il with a powerful slash. To the sword saint's surprise, Il easily dodges the attack. Everyone thinks Il passed out from fear and believes pure luck saved him. But Godefried is not convinced that it was only luck. As Rui carries Il away from the training ground, Godefried wonders whether Il is hiding his real strength or if it was truly nothing more than a lucky accident. Talion then walks over and apologizes to Godefried for causing the misunderstanding. The only small country that has stayed neutral during the war is Frauenvale. The capital of Frauenvale is Santagon, and on its eastern side is the Eastern Gate Guard, where Il is only a trainee. After getting defeated by the Sword Saint, Il is taken back home by Rui. As soon as they arrive, Il's sister, Nisha, shouts and asks what happened this time. Rui greets her first and says it is nothing serious. Il simply lost his balance. Nisha apologizes to Rui for always having trouble because of her foolish brother. Rui then jokes that she should just marry him instead. To everyone's surprise, Il quickly agrees and tells Rui to go ahead with it. Hearing that, both Nisha and Rui are shocked and ask if he is being serious. Il says yes, but only if Rui takes him along after the marriage too. Rui bursts into laughter, saying that would be far too much baggage to carry. After that, all of them head inside the house, where Nisha keeps complaining about her brother. She says Il is always a mess, never wakes up unless she drags him out of bed, and keeps causing one problem after another. Rui agrees and says today's training was just as bad. He jokes that even Nisha would be more reliable with a sword because Il only dragged his weapon around without doing anything useful. At that moment, both Rui and Nisha feel that if they do not keep looking after Il, they cannot imagine what kind of trouble he will get into next. Soon, Rui gets ready to leave because he has a night patrol duty. As he walks away, Il calls him future brother-in-law and tells him to do his best. Il then follows him outside and says that Rui is working too hard again. Rui smiles and says he has no choice because he also has to take care of his mother, so he needs to earn some extra money. Il says Rui is really amazing, but jokes that he still has no plans to support him. Suddenly, Nisha punches Il from behind. She then tells Rui to stay safe and take good care of himself. The scene then shifts to the night, where Rui is patrolling the streets. He thinks about dangerous people like the Silver Wolf and the One-Eyed Demon still being out there, making the job unsafe. Even so, he has to keep working to earn money. 2 other guards are patrolling with him, and they are chatting while walking. Suddenly, all 3 feel a strange presence ahead of them and quickly draw their swords. They stand on guard, wondering if a killer is nearby. To their surprise, the Sword Saint, Godefried, steps out from the shadows and asks if they are members of the Eastern Gate Guard. Rui answers yes and asks what the Sword Saint is doing outside so late at night. Godefried says he has heard about the recent attacks, so he came to patrol the streets himself in case another attacker appears. After that, he asks if he can join their patrol, and everyone agrees. The other two guards walk ahead while Rui stays beside the Sword Saint. Along the way, Rui asks how he became strong enough to earn the title of Sword Saint. Godefried replies that no matter how hard someone trains, everyone eventually reaches a limit. Rui then asks what a person should do after reaching that limit. The Sword Saint calmly says the answer is simple. The very next moment, he suddenly draws his sword and cuts Rui down, saying that all they have to do is kill people. Before the other two guards can even react, they are also cut down in the blink of an eye. After killing all three, the Sword Saint says that no one can truly grow stronger until they know what it feels like to take someone's life. He tells them they should be happy because they have become the stepping stones for his strength. On the other side, as Rui slowly dies, he quietly apologizes to his mother in his heart for leaving her all alone. Suddenly, the Sword Saint senses someone behind him and instantly swings his sword toward the presence. But to his surprise, nobody is there. He starts wondering if it was only his imagination. In reality, a red-haired person had been secretly watching everything from the shadows. The scene then shifts to the next morning, where Il rushes toward the place where Rui's body and the bodies of the other guards have been laid out. As Il looks at the bodies, a man named Baudouin walks over and says that the killer is the slasher demon, but it is different from the one who killed Il's father. Il looks surprised and asks if Baudouin can really tell something like that. Baudouin nods and says he can tell just by looking at the sword wounds. Il quietly agrees. Soon after, Il notices Rui's mother and does not know what to say. At that moment, Rui's mother, Mia, asks Baudouin why her son's body looks like that and wonders who could do something so cruel to another person's child. Baudouin walks over to Mia and tells her that they will definitely catch the culprit. But Mia starts shouting that catching him is not enough because the killer deserves to die. She desperately yells for someone to call the Night Dwellers, saying they are the only ones who can make her son's murderer suffer the same fate, or something even worse. After that, Mia walks out onto the street, repeating over and over that someone should call the Night Dwellers. Suddenly, a red-haired boy walks up to her and quietly tells her to visit the three-toned alley on Nameless Street at dusk. He says that is where she will find what she is looking for. Mia finds the boy very creepy, but the next scene shows her going to that place anyway. She searches the area until she finds a curtain with the picture of a sword hanging on it. Even after looking everywhere, she cannot find anyone and starts crying, believing the Night Dwellers are not real. But as the sun sets, the light casts the shadow of a sword onto the crimson curtain. She suddenly remembers an old rumor that says anyone wishing to contact the Night Dwellers must simply say, "Draw a line for me." The moment she says those words, an unseen voice asks what request she wants to make. Mia immediately shouts that she wants the person who killed her son to be killed. The unseen voice calmly replies that such a request is not cheap. Mia says she is willing to give all the money she has been saving for her son's wedding. She says she does not care what happens to her anymore. She only wants her son's killers to be punished. She begs them to take revenge for her. The unseen person warns her that revenge will not bring her son back. Even so, Mia refuses to change her mind. Seeing her determination, the unseen man calls the red-haired boy, Red Cat, and asks who should take the job. At that moment, another voice suddenly speaks up, apologizing for interrupting and saying that this mission should be given to him. The unseen man reminds him that no one should mix personal feelings with work. But the mysterious man calmly replies that it is fine because he wants to handle this matter himself. The screen then reveals that the mysterious man is none other than Il, who is secretly known as one of the Night Dwellers, the most feared S-class assassin. The next scene shifts to the Eastern Gate Guard headquarters, where the other guards angrily question Vice Captain Talion about why they are not taking revenge for their fallen comrades. Talion tells everyone to calm down because they cannot afford to lose even more soldiers. He explains that Commander Baudouin has already asked the other 3 units for support, but the guards believe that their own numbers are enough to overwhelm whoever the killer is. Just then, they notice Il walking out of the guard room and ask where he is going. Il calmly says that since there is no patrol today, he is planning to go home and get some sleep. Everyone is stunned by his answer and asks if he does not care about their dead comrades. Il replies that once someone is dead, it is over because they are never coming back. So, if anyone wants revenge now, they are only doing it for their own satisfaction. After saying that, Il quietly walks away. Hearing those words, everyone starts calling Il a heartless jerk. They also say that since he is useless anyway, there is no reason to stop him. Outside, Il repeats his own words that once a person is dead, everything is over. That is exactly why he is going to take revenge for Rui, not for justice, but for his own satisfaction. As night falls, people all over the city shut their doors and windows and turn off their lights, afraid that the slasher demon might come for them. At the same time, the sword saint, Godofreid, walks through the empty streets, searching for people. But the roads are completely deserted. Even so, he is pleased because news of the one-slash-demon has already reached the royal castle. He believes that many powerful warriors will soon come after him, giving him the chance to achieve the only thing he has ever wanted, to be known as the greatest swordsman. Ever since he was young, he had trained for countless hours and defeated thousands of opponents in practice duels. Even after all those victories, he still believed there was a higher level waiting for him. To reach that level, he was willing to pay any price. One day, after getting drunk and losing his temper, he got into a fight on the streets. After that incident, he began sharpening his skills by killing people one after another. The thrill of taking lives filled him with excitement, and that was how he earned the name of the Sword Saint, Godofreid, the immortal one-slash-demon. He looks forward to the day when he can face powerful knights in a battle to the death. Still, he feels that things have not gone as planned because the leader of the Eastern Gate Guard, Baudouin, has not reacted the way he expected. As a result, no one has come to challenge him for revenge. But just then, Godofreid suddenly senses someone's presence nearby. He starts wondering who could be careless enough to come near him alone. Suddenly, to his surprise, he sees the same useless trainee from the practice match, the one who gave him a strange feeling after dodging his sword by the smallest margin. Il casually asks if that is not the Sword Saint and wonders what someone like him is doing in a place like this. Godofreid calmly replies that he is simply returning home after visiting an acquaintance. He then asks if Il is out on patrol. Il says yes, but starts complaining that the job is not easy. Since everyone else is too scared to go outside, all the patrol work has been pushed onto a low-ranking guard like him. He jokes that if he runs into the one-slash-demon, he is definitely finished. Hearing that, the Sword Saint bursts into laughter. Il then says it is not something to laugh about because the streets are dangerous, so even the Sword Saint should be careful. Godofreid laughs again and confidently replies that there is no one who can defeat him. That is simply impossible. Il nods in agreement and starts walking away. The moment Il turns his back, Godofreid suddenly swings his sword at him, slicing him cleanly in half. The Sword Saint laughs and says that no one should ever let their guard down. But to his complete shock, Il slowly turns around and calmly asks if he did not just say that the Sword Saint should also be careful. At that very moment, Godofreid suddenly feels something strange, and before he can react, his own body is cut cleanly in half. He cannot understand what just happened. There was nobody behind him, so how was he the one who got sliced apart? Il calmly asks if the Sword Saint was not the one who said there would only be one more body tonight. As Godofreid looks up, he is completely stunned to see that Il does not have a single wound on his body. He cannot understand how his slash failed to leave even a scratch. Il then asks if the Sword Saint really believed he was the only monster hiding in these dark alleys. With tension written across his face, Godofreid asks who Il really is because no matter how skilled a swordsman may be, no one should have been able to defeat him like this. Il says that there is a group of monsters who gained inhuman powers because of a curse that slowly eats away at their bodies. Those people are known as the Night Dwellers. The Sword Saint is stunned because he always believed they were nothing more than a story made up by the weak. Il then says that since Godofreid took away the most precious thing from someone else, he is going to take away the thing Godofreid values the most. Since every swordsman treasures his honor and title, the wound on Godofreid's back clearly looks like it was made by the one-slash-demon's technique. Everyone will believe that the Sword Saint was cut down while trying to run away. His proud reputation will be destroyed forever, and Il himself will stand as the witness. From now on, the name of the one-slash-demon will be remembered as the man who defeated the Sword Saint before disappearing without a trace. Il tells Godofreid to carry that stained name with him all the way to hell. After saying those words, Il quietly walks away. The scene then shifts to a few days later at the barracks where Rui's mother is staying. She is packing her clothes and the few things she owns because she has to leave the barracks. While packing, she thinks that after Rui's death, only one more murder happened in the city. That must mean the Night Dwellers really took revenge on the killer for her. Just as she walks outside, Il is standing there and asks if she is leaving. She explains why she has to go, so Il offers to help carry her luggage. He jokingly asks if she is sure because the bag looks very heavy. She smiles and says that someone like him should have no problem carrying it. But the moment Il tries to lift it, he realizes it is far heavier than he expected and cannot even pick it up. After sharing a laugh, the two of them lift the luggage together and carry it to the cart. Before Rui's mother climbs aboard, Il quietly hands her a small money pouch. The moment she sees it, she realizes it is the same payment she gave the night dwellers to take revenge for her son. Confused, she asks why he is returning it. Il simply says that Rui always wanted her to be happy, and if she is not happy, then Rui will never be able to rest in peace. After saying that, Il gently helps her onto the cart, tells her to take care of herself, and quietly walks away. As the cart moves forward, the other passengers laugh and chat happily. Watching them reminds her of the friendship between Rui and Il, and a small smile appears on her face. And with that, Rui's story of revenge finally comes to an end. The next morning, the Eastern Gate guards are out on patrol. After the patrol ends, Baudouin tells everyone to get ready to head back. Just then, one of the guards points out that Il still has not returned. Hearing that, Baudouin gets angry and starts shouting Il's name, asking where he wandered off to. Il is actually sleeping carelessly under a tree. As soon as he hears Baudouin's voice, he panics and realizes that he accidentally fell asleep. He quickly gets up and runs toward the squad, wondering what kind of punishment he is going to get this time. Meanwhile, the other guards are talking about how different regions are asking for more soldiers to be sent to the battlefield. They say that the war is not their only problem because the night dwellers are also becoming a bigger threat. One guard jokes that if Il ever ends up in a real battle, he will probably be the first one to die. Another guard tells him not to say that because Il is only working to support his family after his father passed away. Baudouin says that even so, Il cannot keep slacking off because it hurts the team's morale, especially with the night dwellers still around. By then, Il finally reaches the group, but in his hurry, he trips and falls flat on the ground. Seeing that, Baudouin loses his temper and smacks Il on the head. After that, they continue walking, while Baudouin keeps scolding Il the whole way. As they pass through the town, an elderly woman smiles and asks if Baudouin is working overtime again. Baudouin replies that he is not, and says he is only giving Il another lecture. The old woman looks at Il and tells him not to cause the captain so much trouble anymore. Il starts thinking that if he gets hit or lectured any longer, he might not survive because Baudouin has been scolding him non-stop for the past half hour. Wanting to change the subject, Il suddenly asks Baudouin about his daughter. Baudouin immediately gets angry and warns Il not to even think about doing anything involving his daughter. Il is completely confused because Baudouin's daughter is only 3 years old. He cannot understand why Baudouin reacted like that. While trying to think of something else, Il notices Baudouin's sword and asks about it instead. Baudouin explains that it was forged by a blacksmith named Ward, who was around long before Il joined the guards. He also says that Ward created a new method of refining steel. Hearing that, Il asks what kind of steel it is. Baudouin proudly says it is called dark green steel. Il then asks how effective it is. Baudouin explains that dark green steel is twice as hard as ordinary steel and keeps a sharp edge without chipping. He says that if every guard could be equipped with weapons made from it, the number of casualties would drop greatly. Seeing how passionately Baudouin talks about it, Il smiles. He then asks why Baudouin has not submitted the idea to the weapons supply department. Baudouin sighs and says that it is impossible because Ward died without ever telling anyone the secret behind making dark green steel. Il curiously asks if the blacksmith died in an accident. Baudouin replies that he believes it was the work of the night dwellers. Il speaks up and says it is not right to blame everything on the night dwellers because there could have been another reason. Baudouin then explains the full story behind the blacksmith's death. Ward died inside his workshop 7 days after finishing that sword. Whenever he worked on dark green steel, he always locked himself inside so no one could learn his secret method. One day, when he did not come out for a long time, his daughter and apprentice became worried and broke down the door. Inside, they found Ward's dead body. The strange part was that no one could have entered or left the locked room. That is why many people believed only a night dweller could have done something like that. Il then asks if there is no way to make dark green steel anymore. Baudouin says he believes Ward must have written the method down somewhere. If they can find those notes, they might still be able to recreate it. Suddenly, while they are talking and walking, they hear people shouting for help. When Il looks over, he sees a flashy-looking woman being surrounded by several rough-looking thugs. As soon as Baudouin steps in, the woman immediately shouts, asking if they are really guards because they are taking so long to help a lady in trouble. The thugs quickly recognize Baudouin, and Baudouin asks why they are still involved in shady business. A man named Hiruruku steps forward and asks Baudouin to give them a break. He says they are only there to collect a debt because someone owes them money. Before Hiruruku can finish speaking, the woman loudly complains that she is supposed to be scared while surrounded by a bunch of dangerous-looking thugs. Baudouin then asks who actually owes the debt and how much it is. Hiruruku explains that the woman standing in front has nothing to do with it. The real person is the young girl standing behind her, and they are only trying to collect the money she owes. Baudouin tells Hiruruku to give them some space for now and leave the area. Hiruruku agrees without arguing and walks away with his men. Watching everything unfold, Il feels impressed by the calm way Baudouin handled the situation with the thugs. Hearing that, Baudouin angrily smacks Il on the head and asks if he is ever going to do his job instead of just standing around. He then turns to the two girls and asks if they are hurt. But the older girl suddenly gets upset and asks why he is looking down on her just because she is a dancer. Baudouin is left confused, wondering why she gets angry over every little thing. The girl quickly apologizes for her outburst and thanks both of them for saving them. She introduces herself as Lim Lim, a traveling dancer, while the young girl beside her is named Shia. Baudouin immediately recognizes Shia, so Lim Lim asks if he already knows her. Baudouin nods and says that Shia is the blacksmith ward's daughter and they have met before. Meanwhile, Il starts complaining about how long he can survive if Baudouin keeps punching him on the head. Shia then walks over and politely bows to thank them again for helping her. Il tells her not to worry about it, but the moment she stands up and looks at him, he becomes completely flustered because she is incredibly beautiful. Suddenly, Lim Lim steps in and warns Il not to stare at Shia with such creepy eyes. Embarrassed, Il quickly apologizes and steps back. After that, Baudouin asks Shia if she really owes money to those thugs. Shia replies that she has no idea because those men suddenly came to the shop and demanded repayment. Baudouin looks confused and asks what shop she is talking about. Shia explains that she has been working as a server at a bar to help support her older brother. Now she is in trouble because she never heard anything about her father's debts and has no idea where she can get the money to pay them back. Hearing that, Il thinks it makes sense because he would also be confused if his own family suddenly disappeared. Baudouin understands her situation, but the bigger problem is that Shia does not even know the secret of making dark green steel. He realizes they have to do something because Hiruruku is known as a dangerous thug who never gives up once he sets his eyes on someone. He will not leave Shia alone so easily. Because of that, Baudouin orders Il to guard Shia starting the next day. Il is completely stunned and asks why he has to do it. He complains that those thugs might attack him instead. Baudouin tells him to stop whining and start acting like a real guard. Even Lim Lim looks doubtful and asks if Il is really capable of protecting anyone. Il refuses, saying that he still has training to do. But Baudouin immediately shuts him down, reminding him that he never trains anyway and only sleeps through it. He even says it would not matter if Il never came back to the training grounds. Baudouin then offers him a deal. If Il accepts this job, all of his past slacking will be forgiven, and he will not have to attend training anymore. Even after hearing that, Il loudly shouts that he still refuses. In the end, however, Il has no other choice but to accept the job of guarding Shia. The next scene shifts to Il's house, where he is having dinner with his family. During the meal, his sister Nisha teasingly asks if her big brother is really going to spend every day with a beautiful girl named Shia. Il quickly denies it and says it is not like that because he is only assigned to be her bodyguard. Nisha then asks him who is cuter, her or Shia. Il tries to flatter Nisha with a compliment, but she only gets even more suspicious because the praise sounds far too fake. Just then, their mother steps in and tells Nisha to back off because she is the only one allowed to like or dislike Il. Hearing that, Il is left speechless and asks if she even remembers that he is her son too. Both his mother and sister then start making fun of him together, calling him creepy, lifeless, and the most hopeless person in the world. After finishing dinner, Nisha helps their mother wash the dishes and quietly asks if Il knows that he was adopted by their family. Their mother replies that he does know. She then remembers how their father always used to say that if they stayed together, they would become a real family someday. Il quietly hears their conversation from his room and thinks that his father really said some unnecessary things. The next morning, Il heads out to find Shia's house, but the map Baudouin drew is so terrible that he keeps getting lost. Just as he finally reaches the area, he notices a silver-haired boy acting suspiciously near the house. Il walks over and asks him where Shia's workshop is. The boy suddenly panics and points straight ahead, shouting that the house is right in front of him. Il gets confused because the boy reminds him of Red Cat. He wonders why Red Cat suddenly has silver hair and even a different voice. After thinking about it for a moment, he decides the boy must be Red Cat's twin, or maybe just someone who looks very similar. Just then, Shia comes out of the house and happily welcomes Il, saying she never expected him to really show up as her bodyguard. Il sighs and says he has no choice because if he skips the job, Baudouin will strangle him. He even jokes that Baudouin looks exactly like a gorilla. The moment Shia says she is going to tell Baudouin about that comment, Il immediately panics and explains that he was not insulting him. He hurriedly adds that gorillas are actually cute, just like Baudouin. Shia simply stares at him, clearly not understanding the joke, so Il gives up and follows her inside. Looking around, he compliments how nice the house is. Shia sadly replies that the house will soon belong to someone else because her salary is not enough to maintain such a big place. She hopes to sell it so she can pay off the debts and secure a better future for her little brother. Il realizes that Shia is planning to repay the debt somehow. Shia explains that she received a message from her father's assistant saying he had found a buyer for the mansion. Hearing that, Il starts wondering that if selling the mansion is enough to pay off the debt, then why are those people putting so much pressure on a young girl like her? Shia then welcomes Il into the main house. As he walks inside, Il thinks that such a large house must have huge rooms. But to his surprise, Shia smiles and tells him that the entire first floor is used as a workshop, so there are no large living rooms at all. Il is stunned, wondering how she guessed exactly what he was thinking. He even starts feeling sorry for whoever marries Shia in the future because she seems to read people's minds so easily. After going inside, Shia calls her little brother, Pita, and asks him to greet their bodyguard. The moment Pita hears Il's name, he loudly says that it sounds really strange. Shia immediately scolds him and tells him to apologize. Il quickly tells her not to worry because he is already used to hearing things like that. He greets Pita with a smile and even tries to crack a joke, but just like before, nobody understands it. Il quietly realizes that he should probably stop trying to make jokes. Pita then innocently asks if Il is his sister's boyfriend because their father always said that if Shia ever brought a man home, they would have to blow him away. Il quickly denies it. After that, the scene shifts to the place where Shia works. Il quietly sits nearby with a drink, keeping an eye on her while she happily serves customers. Watching her work so hard, Il realizes that Shia is much stronger than he first thought. Suddenly, Lim Lim walks over and asks why he is drinking while he is supposed to be working. Il accidentally calls Lim Lim by the wrong name, making her instantly furious. She then asks if he is at least making sure to protect Shia properly. Il confidently replies that he is and promises to do his best. Just then, Il suddenly senses someone's presence nearby and immediately tells Shia to get behind him. Shia quickly follows his instruction. Suddenly, 4 or 5 men burst into the bar and start shouting, asking where the blacksmith's daughter is. Meanwhile, Il and Lim Lim are busy arguing because Il is hiding behind her and using her as a shield. Il shouts that his only job is to protect Shia, so he would rather avoid fighting the thugs. Lim Lim fires back, saying that she is still young and has a bright future ahead of her. Il laughs at her reply, but still tells her to dance or do something to distract the thugs. While the two of them continue arguing, Shia nervously tells them to calm down because this is not the time for such nonsense. Just then, Hiruruku walks into the bar. Seeing him, Il becomes tense because Hiruruku looks far more intimidating than before. Hiruruku calmly says that he only wants to speak with the young lady, so there is no reason for anyone to be afraid. Il says that he has something he wants to ask first. Recognizing Il as one of Baudouin's guards, Hiruruku tells him to go ahead. Il explains that Shia is planning to sell her mansion soon, and once she gets the money, she can repay the debt. So he asks if they cannot simply wait until then. Hiruruku smiles and reveals that Shia's house has already been mortgaged to another lender. Everyone is shocked by the news, including Shia, who had no idea about it herself. Hiruruku then says that Shia owns something much more valuable than the mansion, the secret of dark green steel. If she sells that secret to the guild, she can easily pay off every debt. Hearing the name Dark Green Steel, Il remembers everything Baudouin told him. Hiruruku adds that Ward's apprentice already told them everything. Shia quickly says that she does not know anything about the secret. Hearing that, Hiruruku loses his temper and says he will make her talk by force. As the thugs move toward them, Il starts wondering how to get out of the situation, or if he finally has to fight. But before anyone can make a move, all the thugs are suddenly knocked down by someone. Hiruruku angrily shouts, asking who the newcomer is. The young man casually replies that he is nobody important. He simply stepped in because he thought their demands were completely unreasonable. Seeing him, Lim Lim immediately brightens up because he looks like a kind and dependable person. Il notices the man's red hair and thinks he looks like someone from another land, so he is probably just a traveler. The customers inside the bar quickly run outside as a fight breaks out. The red-haired man easily defeats every thug and gives them a painful lesson for causing trouble. Lim Lim watches the fight with sparkling eyes. After beating them all, the red-haired man asks Hiruruku if he wants to continue. Furious, Hiruruku orders his men to leave, saying they will settle this another day. Before leaving, he asks the stranger for his name. The young man introduces himself as Hiker and calmly tells them to come back whenever they want because he has no intention of running away. After Hiruruku and his men leave the bar, Lim Lim rushes over and happily thanks Hiker for helping them. Just as Hiker is about to leave, Lim Lim asks him to stay because she wants to treat him to a meal. From behind, Il jokingly shouts that she is a dangerous predator. Lim Lim immediately elbows him so hard that he drops to the floor in pain. Seeing that, Hiker asks if Il is all right. Lim Lim casually tells him not to worry because Il will be fine. The scene then shows everyone sharing a meal together. While eating, Il quietly watches Hiker and thinks he looks like the kind of person who would never get involved in trouble. Ironically, even though Hiker is a genuinely good person, he is also an idiot because he has no idea that he has already stepped into a mess far bigger than he can handle alone. The scene then shifts to the next morning, when people in the town discover a body floating in the river. To everyone's shock, the body belongs to none other than Hiker. After Il learns that the body belongs to Hiker, he immediately goes to Bodwan and tells him everything that happened at the bar the previous day. After hearing the whole story, Bodwan becomes convinced that Hiruruku's gang is behind the murder. The problem, however, is that Hiker has no family in town, so no one is going to file a complaint for his death. Il agrees that it is true, and he also feels there is nothing he can do about it. He even thinks that, in the end, Hiker brought this on himself because that is just the kind of cruel world they all live in. Bodwan then mentions something strange about Hiker's body. A large tattoo was found on it, explaining exactly how his body should be buried. Confused, Il asks what that is supposed to mean. Bodwan replies that they have no idea, but they decided to treat it as Hiker's final wish. Because of that, they buried him in the graveyard at the edge of the town. After that, Bodwan asks how Shia's situation is going. Il explains that Hiruruku's gang keeps showing up to pressure her into paying the debt. Hearing that, Bodwan asks why Il does not help Shia find a way to repay the money. Il looks confused and asks why he should do that because it is not part of a guard's job. Bodwan then shares an idea. He says Il should convince Shia to search for the secret of dark green steel because there is no way Ward died without leaving the method behind somewhere. If they can find those records, they can sell the technique and use the money to clear Shia's debt. Bodwan also says he trusts Il's sharp instincts and believes he is the right person to find the hidden records. After listening to everything, Il quietly agrees. After that, Il goes to Shia's house and announces that he is there. Seeing him, Shia happily welcomes him back and thanks him for coming again to help her. Il then asks Lim Lim if she has been guarding Shia properly. Shia quickly tells him to lower his voice because her head is hurting. Il remembers what happened the previous night. After the incident at the bar, Lim Lim was so shaken that she stayed with Shia all night, drinking to keep her company. That is why she is now suffering from a terrible headache. Il then asks where Pita is. Shia explains that Pita has gone to her father's apprentice's house for training. Hearing that, Il starts thinking about what he should do next. He does not want to get dragged into any more trouble, but he also cannot leave the two siblings to deal with everything alone. In the end, he decides to try Bodwan's idea and search for the secret of dark green steel. He asks Shia for permission to look through her father's workshop, and she agrees. The three of them begin searching the workshop, but even after checking every corner, they cannot find anything useful. As they continue searching, Il starts getting annoyed because Lim Lim keeps following him everywhere. Finally, he asks why she refuses to leave him alone. Lim Lim immediately replies that she is not going to leave Shia alone with him. While they continue looking around, Shia points out the exact spot where her father's body was found after his death. Hearing that, Il learns that Ward's body was lying face down on the floor. He begins thinking about the strange case. The only windows in the workshop are small openings near the ceiling, and they are so narrow that not even a cat could easily squeeze through them. So how did Ward die inside a locked room? Shia then says that after her father's death, she even tried looking for the night dwellers because she thought they might be able to help. Il laughs and tells her that she is being a little foolish because the night dwellers are only a rumor. Even if they did exist, they are assassins, not heroes who help people for free. Shia quietly agrees with him. Just then, Lim Lim suddenly shouts because she gets covered in soot while checking near the furnace. When Il walks over to see what happened, he suddenly notices something strange. Even though it is a blacksmith's workshop, the entire room is unbelievably clean. He asks Shia if Ward was always that particular about keeping everything tidy. Shia nods and asks how he figured that out. Lim Lim points out that the only dirty places are around the furnace and the broken pieces of the door. Everything else is spotless, which feels very unusual for a blacksmith's workshop. Shia explains that her father was a perfectionist who always kept everything in perfect order. He hated it whenever something was moved out of place and would get angry very easily. Il then asks if Ward always worked alone. Shia replies that he did. Whenever he was researching dark green steel, he never allowed anyone else into the workshop, not even his apprentice. She also remembers that on the day Ward died, his apprentice, Torque, accidentally stepped on the shoes Ward always wore. Ward became furious and punished him for it. After hearing everything, Il quietly starts putting all the pieces together in his mind. None of the clues seem to make sense on their own. But he feels that if someone is connected to every incident, then the truth might finally become clear. Il suddenly puts a few things together. Before leaving, he calls Lim Lim over and tells her that if anyone shows up while he is gone, she must never leave Shia alone with them. Lim Lim confidently agrees. Il then says that he has something important to take care of and also needs to go home. When Shia tries to stop him and offers to make him some food, he politely refuses, saying that his sister Nisha will get angry if he does not eat at home. After Il leaves, Shia wonders if he really has a little sister. Lim Lim smiles and says that Il's sister must have been raised very well if she can keep someone like him under control. She adds that anyone living with a brother like Il would naturally become strict sooner or later. Shia laughs at first because the comment is funny, but her smile soon fades as she remembers that she also has to become stronger for the sake of her little brother, Pita. Thinking about that leaves her feeling a little sad. The scene then shifts to the city's nightlife district, a place filled with brothels and shady businesses where Il decides to gather information. To him, the worst part of the district is the terrible smell and the sight of people forced to sell themselves just to survive. Il hates the drinking, the crime, and the slavery around him. The whole place makes him feel sick, but he forces himself to stay because he needs answers. As soon as he reaches the entrance, the guard blocks his way, saying that children are not allowed inside. Il replies that he is one of Baudouin's guards. He quietly shows the guard a few coins and says that he wants to meet Hiruruku. The guard accepts the money and leads him inside. When Hiruruku sees Il, he looks genuinely surprised and even praises him for having the courage to come there alone. Hiruruku then asks why Il keeps interfering with his business. Il calmly replies that he only has to pretend he is resisting a little, or his boss, Baudouin, will kill him for not doing his job as a guard. After that, Il says he wants to discuss a few things about Shia. Hiruruku shrugs and says that a girl like her can never stay safe in this world. Once someone's parents die, they either end up under someone else's control or are thrown into slavery. That is simply the kind of city Santogen has become. Hiruruku tells Il to focus on being a guard and stay out of debt collection. Il quietly says that he is only doing his job. Then he reveals that he has found a lead about the person who killed Shia's father. Hearing those words, Hiruruku's expression immediately changes. Il looks straight at Hiruruku. He already knows about Hiruruku's dark connection to the killer. So, instead of asking a direct question, he throws a venomous taunt right at his face, mocking that Hiruruku must know the killer very, very well. The scene then shifts to Shia's house, where Torki returns with Pita, who is crying nonstop. Worried, Shia quickly asks what happened. Torki says he is not sure because he found Pita crying and decided to bring him home right away. Shia gently asks Pita what happened, but Pita is too upset to answer. Torque then says that maybe the debt collectors showed up at the place where Pita was training. He also mentions that the same debt collectors even came to his own house. Shia immediately apologizes, but Torque tells her not to worry because there was nothing he could have done anyway. At that moment, Shia asks Lim Lim to take Pita into another room and calm him down. Lim Lim refuses at first because she does not want to leave Shia alone. However, Shia tells her it will be fine since Torque is the only other person there. Even though Lim Lim is still worried, she finally agrees and leaves with Pita. As soon as they are alone, Shia says that she only learned the mansion had already been mortgaged after the debt collectors mentioned it the previous day. Torque then asks why she does not simply sell the secret of making dark green steel. Shia replies that she knows it would solve everything, but she has no idea where her father wrote down the method. Torque then quietly suggests another option. He tells Shia that with her beauty, she could earn a huge amount of money by selling herself as a slave, which would be enough to pay off all the debt. Shia is completely shocked by those words. She knows becoming a slave is a terrible fate, but she also realizes she has to do something to repay the debt. Otherwise, the debt collectors will keep coming after Pita again and again. She even imagines a future where not only she, but Pita as well, could be sold into slavery. That terrifying thought fills her with fear. In the end, she convinces herself that she has to do whatever it takes to protect her little brother. Just as she makes that painful decision, Torque's expression slowly changes into a cold and sinister smile. At the same time, after Il asks whether Hiruruku is connected to the killer, Hiruruku simply smiles and tells him to explain his reasoning. Just as Il is about to answer, one of Hiruruku's men walks over, places a sword against Il's neck, and orders him to hurry up and talk. Even with a blade at his throat, Il calmly smiles. He says he is not interested in arresting anyone. All he wants is for Shia to be free and stop being chased by debt collectors. He explains that Shia is currently facing 4 different problems. The first is finding the secret behind making dark green steel. As for the other 3, Il believes he already has the answers. He starts with Ward's murder. The workshop was locked, and the only opening was a small window, so everyone assumed it was an impossible mystery. But Il does not believe that. He says Ward was a man who followed the same routine every single day. Unless something unusual happened, he would never change his habits. While waiting for the furnace to heat up, Ward would always lean against the same wall and smoke a cigarette to pass the time. That means someone could have stabbed him through a small hole in the wall, striking a vital spot without ever entering the room. Only someone who knew Ward's routine could have done that. The person who fits that description is none other than Ward's apprentice, Torque. On the day Ward died, Torque had been sent outside to work in the garden after being thrown out of the workshop. From there, he would have had the perfect chance to kill his master. Hiruruku praises Il for putting the pieces together, and admits that Torque does sound like the most likely culprit. Il then moves on to the debt issue. He says he checked the account books and found no record of any debt at all. Ward was an organized man who carefully wrote everything down, so there is no way he would have forgotten something so important. That is why Il believes the story about the mansion being mortgaged was also part of Torque's plan. According to Il, Torque murdered his own master out of resentment, joined forces with the debt collectors, and tried to steal everything Ward left behind, including the secret of making dark green steel, so he could sell it for a huge profit. After laying out his theory, Il smiles and asks Hiruruku what he thinks. Hiruruku praises Il's sharp thinking and says his reasoning makes perfect sense. However, he then asks why Il is telling him all this. Il calmly replies that he simply wants a share of the profit. Hiruruku narrows his eyes and warns Il that if he is trying to blackmail them, he will be killed on the spot. Il shrugs and says he is just a guard living on a tiny salary, so he only wants a small cut if everyone else is making money. Hiruruku laughs and says the idea is not bad, but they have not received any money from Torque yet, so they have nothing to give Il. He also reveals that the original plan was to sell Shia as a slave. However, it seems Torque has become greedy and is trying to profit from both sides. The moment Il hears that Shia is going to be sold into slavery, his expression turns cold with anger. But before he can react, Hiruruku calmly says that Il will now have to pay the fare to cross the river of sighs. One of Hiruruku's men immediately grabs Il from behind, presses a sword against his back, and drags him out of the room, laughing that he is about to have some fun tonight. After that, the scene cuts straight to Shia, who is sitting inside a slave trading office. Across from her sits the mysterious woman who secretly manages the night dwellers' requests and agreements. The woman asks Shia one last time if she wants to rethink her decision. Nervously, Shia asks if she is not valuable enough to be sold. The woman gently replies that it is not about that at all. Instead, she asks if Shia truly understands where she is and who she is speaking to. Shia calmly answers that she is in a slave trading house, and the woman before her is the mistress of the place, Miss Kurikara. Kurikara then asks if Shia really understands what becoming a slave means. She explains that whoever buys her will have complete control over her life and death. They can treat her however they want, no matter how cruel or painful it may be. Shia quietly says that she understands. Deep down, she has already prepared herself because all she cares about is protecting her little brother's future. For Peta's sake, she is willing to accept a life of slavery, even though she hates the idea. Kurikara continues warning her about the consequences. She says that Shia could even be killed one day if her owner simply grows tired of her. Shia nods again and says she already knows all of that. Kurikara then asks if there is no one who would be heartbroken if she disappeared. For a moment, Shia thinks about Limlim and Il, but she quietly pushes those thoughts aside and says that her brother's happiness is the only thing that matters to her. Seeing that her resolve has not changed, Kurikara finally agrees to buy her and tells Silvercat to prepare the contract. The silver-haired young man whom Il saw outside Shia's house steps forward and places the contract on the table. Kurikara hands it to Shia but gives her one final warning. She says that once Shia signs the contract, the payment will be sent to her brother, but from that moment on, Shia will belong to someone else forever. She will have no right to refuse anything her master orders. Whether they want to use her, hurt her, or even kill her, she will have no choice but to obey. Even after hearing those terrifying words, Shia does not change her mind. She only thinks about protecting her little brother from suffering the same fate. Without saying another word or hesitating for even a second, Shia picks up the pen and quietly signs the contract. The next morning, near the brothel, one of the workers is frustrated because just after finishing all of his work, he is told that a body is lying behind the building. He assumes it must be the young guard who caused trouble the previous night and got thrown out. But when he goes to pick up the body, he is shocked to see that it is one of the goons, not the guard. He cannot understand how a kid like Il could have managed to kill one of Hiruruku's men. Even so, he takes the body to the old cemetery and hands it over to the caretaker, asking him to deal with it. The old caretaker laughs and says the timing is perfect because one of the graves mysteriously opened by itself that morning. Hearing that, the brothel worker is surprised and wonders how a grave could suddenly open on its own. In the end, he decides it is none of his business, leaves the body there, and walks away. The scene then shifts to Il, who is thinking about how Torque tricked Hiruruku and double-crossed him. Even so, Il is happy because he believes all he has to do now is get back the mortgage money from Torque, and everything will finally be settled. As soon as he reaches Shia's house, he sees Limlim standing outside. Il asks why she is there instead of staying with Shia. The two of them spend a moment joking and arguing over each other's names. But then Il says that once he gets the money back from the real culprit, everything will be over. Hearing that, Limlim suddenly bursts into tears and says the situation is much worse because Shia has disappeared. Il freezes in shock and immediately asks why Limlim was not with her, especially after he told her to protect Shia. He then asks where Peta is. Limlim replies that Peta is probably still asleep in his room. She also explains that the apprentice Il had been asking about Torque, came to see Shia the previous night. Il quickly asks what Torque talked to Shia about. Limlim awkwardly admits that she did not listen because she walked away and gave them some privacy. Hearing that, Il loses his temper and yells at Limlim, calling her completely useless and saying she is only good at dancing, which is probably why no one wants to marry her. Feeling guilty, Limlim apologizes and jokingly says she will make it up to him with a kiss. Il is completely confused, wondering where that idea even came from. But when he looks at Limlim's face, her expression is so serious that it sends chills down his spine. Il quickly refuses, saying that getting a kiss from her would feel more like a punishment than a reward. After calming down, Il starts thinking about where Shia might have gone. Based on what Hiruruku told him, Torque is obsessed with Shia and was even willing to sell her into slavery so he could buy her himself and do whatever he wanted. Suddenly, Il realizes something. If Shia really sold herself at the slave market, then the payment should have been delivered to Pita that very morning. Since morning has already passed, Pita could be in terrible danger. Il immediately rushes into the house, shouting Pita's name. He frantically searches every room, growing more and more anxious because if Torque planned everything from the beginning, then Pita is the next target. Il searches the entire house, but no matter where he looks, Pita is nowhere to be found. The next scene shows Pita crawling out from the tall grass, wondering how everything ended up like this. Just then, someone shouts, asking where he ran off to. Earlier that morning, while Pita was sleeping peacefully, he was suddenly woken up by the silver-haired young man. Pita became nervous, but the young man simply handed him a bag of money and said it was the payment for his sister before quietly leaving. After he was gone, Pita searched the entire house for Shia, but could not find her anywhere. At that moment, Torque arrived at the house. Seeing him, Pita quickly ran over and told him that Shia had disappeared. He also showed him the money the silver-haired man had left behind. The moment Torque saw the money, he told Pita to hand it over, saying he would use it to buy Shia back. He then coldly added that once Shia belonged to him, he would have no more use for Pita. As he said those words, Torque suddenly attacked him. Terrified, Pita ran into the bushes and hid, shouting that he would never come out. But Torque only cared about the money. He began searching everywhere, determined to kill Pita and take the money for himself. After running for a while, Pita noticed a small hole in a wall and thought that if he could squeeze through it, Torque would never be able to catch him. Just as Pita was crawling through the hole, Torque caught up and stabbed him in the leg with a knife. Pita cried out in pain, but somehow managed to pull himself through to the other side. Torque only laughed and shouted that he would simply go around the wall and catch him there. Pita knew it would take Torque at least half an hour to get around from the slum side, so he desperately dragged himself forward, trying to get as far away as possible. As he struggled onward, Pita remembered all the happy days he had spent with his sister. He could not understand why everything had ended this way, or why he had to die like this. Bleeding heavily, he finally reached a crimson curtain with the shadow of a black sword on it. Pita immediately realized that it was the rumored curtain of judgment. According to the legend, anyone who spoke the password, wished for someone's death, and offered a payment could contact the night dwellers. Gathering the last of his strength, Pita shouted, "Draw the line for me." The request was immediately accepted, and an unseen voice asked what he wanted. Pita begged them to save his big sister. Kurikara calmly replied that Pita should not misunderstand them because they were assassins who carried out killings, not heroes who rescued people. She then asked if he wanted them to kill the people hurting his sister instead. Pita answered without hesitation that he did. He wanted every one of them dead. Kurikara accepted the request and told him that it would come with a price. Pita quietly handed over the bag of money. Moments later, the light in his eyes faded, and his life came to an end. Il had been searching all over town for Pita and was completely exhausted. It was already evening, yet he still could not find Pita anywhere. On top of that, he had not been able to find Lim Lim since that morning either. In the end, Il reached a dead end and wondered if he should just return to the mansion. Just then, he noticed a silver-haired young man walking toward him. The moment Il saw his face, he remembered seeing him before and realized he looked just like Red Cat. Curious, Il asked if the silver-haired man wanted something. Silver Cat simply told Il to follow him. Without asking any more questions, Il quietly followed him. When they finally arrived at Kurikata's trading house, Il realized that his suspicion had been correct all along. Even so, he asked what had happened to the previous handler, Red Cat. Silver Cat calmly replied that Red Cat had been his sister, and she was now dead. Hearing that, Il apologized. He then said he wanted to hand this job over to someone else because he already had too many things to deal with. Silver Cat replied that this request was connected to both of them, so Il could not walk away from it. Confused, Il asked what he meant by both of them. Instead of answering, Silver Cat simply told him to keep following. Il did as he was told. When they reached the next room, he froze in shock after seeing Pita's lifeless body lying on the floor. Before Il could say anything, Kurikata walked in from behind and explained that Pita had become their client. His final request was for the night dwellers to kill the people who were trying to ruin his big sister's life. Il quietly asked if there had been no way to save Pita. Kurikata sadly shook her head and said it had been impossible, even for her. Il silently accepted the answer. Kurikata then explained that she already knew every detail of the case. The targets of Pita's request were Torque and Hiruruku, so she had decided to leave most of the mission to the two people who were personally connected to it. Il became confused again and asked why everyone kept saying two. He wondered who the second assassin was and even guessed it might be those twins again. Kurikata shook her head and replied that this time she had chosen two people who both had personal reasons to take the job. Just then, someone stepped out of the shadows. Il looked over in surprise and saw that it was Lim Lim. Stunned, he asked if Lim Lim was really an assassin too, and if she was, why she had never told him. Lim Lim smiled and replied that the same question applied to Il because he had never told her about his own identity either. For a few moments, the two of them simply stared at each other. Then Lim Lim broke the silence with a cheerful smile and introduced herself once again. She said she was Lim Lim, a fun-loving dancer and also a secret member of the shadowy assassin group known as the Night Dwellers. Il let out a tired sigh and turned toward Kurikata. He complained that she could have at least warned him that one of his fellow assassins was someone he already knew. Otherwise, meeting each other in broad daylight could have caused a serious problem. Kurikata apologizes and says she will be more careful from now on. Lim Lim then looks at Peta's body and quietly asks who could do something so cruel to an unarmed child. The moment she mentions weapons, Il suddenly remembers the one thing connected to every incident, the formula for dark green steel. He recalls Hiruruku asking about it, but then another question comes to his mind. Why did Hiruruku want Shia to sell the formula to the guild? What would Hiruruku gain from doing that? Suddenly, everything clicks together. Il remembers the conversation he had with Bodwan, who also wanted the dark green steel formula because it could strengthen the guard's weapons. Seeing the look on Il's face, Kurikata asks if he has figured something out. Il nods and says he finally knows who the real mastermind behind everything is. He quickly explains his conclusion to Kurikata. After hearing the whole story, Kurikata says she understands. She decides to assign another target to the A-rank assassin known as the Undying King. Turning to Silvercat, she orders him to bring the Undying King because it is time to begin the mission. She then gives her final orders. The B-rank assassin, Last Kiss, and the S-rank assassin, Worst, are to hunt down everyone whose lives have crossed the boundary line. Lim Lim smiles and praises Il, saying she never imagined the world's most feared assassin, Worst, would turn out to be someone like him. She admits that people really cannot judge a book by its cover. Il smiles back and says he could say the same because he never expected Lim Lim to be an assassin either. Lim Lim then asks if Il is always short on money, since Worst is famous for accepting jobs for payment. Il shakes his head and says he does not care about money. He only accepts it because every request has a price. Curious, Lim Lim asks what he plans to do with all the money he has earned. Il calmly replies that money is nothing more than a boundary line to him. Then he quietly says something that deeply moves Lim Lim. He explains that gold coins exist only to separate life from death. They're like the dust that slowly settles at the bottom while people live their lives. Lim Lim smiles after hearing those words. Confused, Il asks why she is smiling. Lim Lim admits that even though Il always acts cold and uncaring, he is actually a kind and sincere person deep inside, and she finds that strangely adorable. Il suddenly asks Lim Lim to look at her hand and tell him exactly where her fingers end and where her palm begins. He tells her not to give him a vague answer. Lim Lim stares at her hand but cannot answer. Il explains that no one really can because there is no clear line where a finger becomes a palm or where a palm becomes an arm. Everything is connected by uncertain boundaries. He says life is exactly the same. People keep piling one vague thing on top of another, so everyone desperately searches for a clear boundary line. That is why he believes his job is to draw those lines for them. Lim Lim is left speechless. She cannot believe someone feared by every warrior could speak with such quiet wisdom. Among assassins, Il is known as the one who delivers certain death because, unlike everyone else, he never makes excuses before taking a life. Yet Lim Lim realizes that Il is the person least suited to being an assassin. Even so, he continues carrying that burden. Moved by those thoughts, she walks over and wraps one arm around him from the side. Smiling, she asks what he plans to do with all his money. If he has no idea, then his big sister Lim Lim has the perfect suggestion. Il immediately refuses, saying he has no interest in hearing her ideas. Lim Lim laughs and calls him an innocent, kind-hearted boy. Then she tells him she has a deal he definitely will not be able to refuse. Curious, Il asks what she is talking about. With a playful grin, Lim Lim replies that there is a beautiful slave girl named Shia, and Il could simply buy her. A few hours later, Il is waiting inside the trading house with Kurikara, looking unusually quiet and depressed. Kurikara is surprised because the man who could not save Pita no longer looks like the cold-blooded Grim Reaper everyone fears. For the first time, she begins to think she may have judged Il the wrong way. As she keeps looking at him, Il suddenly notices and grumpily asks what she is staring at. Kurikara simply shakes her head and says it is nothing. Just then, Silvercat returns. Kurikara immediately asks about the Undying King. Silvercat replies that the Undying King accepted the request without hesitation and promised to send everyone who crossed the boundary line to their end before the night was over. Hearing that, Kurikara nods in satisfaction. She knows the Undying King always keeps his word because he is one of the most reliable assassins among the Night Dwellers. The scene then shifts to another place, where a mysterious figure wearing ancient-looking armor slowly walks toward the brothel. Inside the brothel, Hiruruku is questioning his men, asking if they have found Torque yet. The goons shake their heads and admit they have not found him anywhere. They also have no clue where the dark green steel formula is. Hiruruku grows even more frustrated. He believes Torque found the formula, sold the mansion, took both the money and the girl, and escaped from the town after double-crossing him. Suddenly, everyone hears someone screaming outside. The goons rush to the door and listen carefully, trying to figure out what is happening. Before they can react, the door suddenly bursts open, and an armored hand shoots inside, instantly killing one of the goons. Everyone freezes in shock. Standing in the doorway is the mysterious warrior wearing antique armor. However, what truly surprises them is not the armor itself, but something else they cannot explain. Hiruruku quickly steps forward and demands to know who the stranger really is. The armored man calmly replies that he is a night dweller. He adds that if no request had been made, he would never have bothered coming after them. The moment Hiruruku hears his voice, he narrows his eyes. He is certain he has heard that voice somewhere before. The scene then shifts back to the trading house, where Il asks Kurikara what kind of person the Undying King really is. Kurikara explains that the Undying King is practically immortal. If someone kills him, he really does die. But what makes him different from everyone else is that before anyone even realizes it, he comes back to life. At the same time, the scene returns to the brothel, where everyone is left speechless after seeing the person inside the ancient armor. It is none other than Hiker. The goons are horrified because they are certain they killed him before. Even Hiruruku cannot believe his eyes. He clearly remembers killing Hiker with his own hands. After recovering from the shock, Hiruruku angrily orders all of his men to attack at once, saying that Hiker is only one man while they greatly outnumber him. The goons rush forward without hesitation. Strangely, Hiker does not move even an inch. One of the goons lands a direct blow to his head, leaving everyone confused about why he did not even try to dodge. Back at the trading house, Kurikara explains that the curse took away one thing from the Undying King, his ability to rest forever. No one knows how long he has continued living because he simply keeps coming back no matter how many times he dies. She reveals that long ago, he was first a slave and later became a king. He was the final ruler of the legendary Kingdom of Highland, a nation that once ruled the entire land. The Undying King seized the throne from his own father, conquered neighboring countries, and eventually destroyed both his kingdom and himself. That is why, in his current life, he does not fear being stabbed, cut down, or even torn apart. To him, death has already lost all meaning. Because he never fears dying, he always outlasts his enemies in the end. That is exactly what happens at the brothel. Hiker calmly cuts down every one of Hiruruku's men before finally killing Hiruruku himself. That night, the first judgment is carried out. But the Night Dweller's mission is still far from over. After hearing the report, Kurikara smiles with satisfaction. One target has already fallen. Now, it is time for the second one. The scene then shifts to a bar, where everyone is talking about how Hiruruku, his men, and one of the prostitutes were found dead in the brothel the previous night. The customers continue discussing the shocking incident while sitting nearby. Torque quietly drinks by himself, looking pale and nervous. The other customers notice his strange behavior and wonder what is bothering him. In reality, Torque is terrified because he cannot understand how Hiruruku and all of his men ended up dead. Since Hiruruku is gone, he no longer has to hand over the dark green steel formula or the money. The only thing left for him is to get Shia after she becomes a slave. However, when he went to the slave trading house, he learned that someone had already bought her. That is why Torque looks both frightened and miserable. He feels like he has lost everything. Just then, Lim Lim walks into the bar. Seeing her, Torque looks confused and asks what she wants. Lim Lim reminds him that they met at Shia's house a few days earlier. She says she has been looking for Shia, and since she could not find her, she decided to come and meet him instead. With a playful smile, she adds that he is exactly her type. Before Torque can even react, Lim Lim suddenly kisses him. Torque is completely stunned, and so is everyone else in the bar who cannot believe what they just saw. Lim Lim continues acting cheerful and flirty, asking if they should have a drink together so they can get to know each other better. Torque is completely confused because the Lim Lim he met before acted nothing like this. As Lim Lim keeps acting more affectionate, Torque lets his guard down and becomes pleased by the attention. She moves a little closer and teasingly asks if he is so obsessed with Shia that it would make any other woman jealous. Without realizing it, Torque begins talking about the past. He admits that the first time he met Shia, she was only 9 years old. From that moment, he became obsessed with her and wanted to make her his own. That obsession drove him to become Ward's apprentice. He endured years of hard work because he believed he would eventually marry Shia. But in the end, Ward announced that Pita would become the next master craftsman and planned to marry Shia into a noble family instead. Feeling betrayed, Torque became furious. He believed Ward had lied to him all along, and that anger pushed him toward revenge. Suddenly, Torque's expression changes. He clutches his throat as breathing becomes difficult. With every passing second, it becomes harder and harder for him to take even a single breath. Seeing Torque struggling to breathe, Lim Lim gently tells him that they should go outside and get some fresh air. Torque agrees, and Lim Lim helps him to his feet before leading him out of the bar. Once they are outside, Torque suddenly starts laughing. He proudly says that Ward and Pita got exactly what they deserved. Even so, he is still furious because Shia, who was supposed to become his slave, had already been bought by someone else. Still, he refuses to give up on her. Without warning, Torque suddenly feels weak and collapses onto the ground. Lim Lim quickly kneels beside him and pretends to be worried, asking if he is all right. A moment later, Torque coughs up blood. Shocked, he stares at the blood on the ground and desperately wonders what is happening to him. He begs Lim Lim to call a doctor, but Lim Lim calmly replies that it would be useless now. Torque immediately realizes that Lim Lim has done something to him. Furious, he demands to know what she did. Lim Lim quietly reminds him that she kissed him only a few minutes earlier. Unfortunately for him, that kiss sealed his fate. Enraged, Torque tries to attack her, but his body no longer responds. He falls flat on the ground, unable to move, writhing helplessly like a wounded insect. With his last strength, he asks who she really is. Lim Lim calmly reveals that she is an assassin of the Night Dwellers. Torque cannot understand why an assassin group would target someone like him. When he asks what she wants, Lim Lim begins telling the story of her past. Long ago, there was a nobleman's heir whose fiancé was consumed by jealousy. The heir fell in love with a maid instead, and the maid became pregnant with his child. Filled with hatred, the fiancé placed a terrible curse on the maid without anyone knowing. Later, the maid gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Overjoyed, she kissed her newborn daughter. The moment their lips touched, the maid died. The reason was simple. The baby's body carried a deadly poison more dangerous than the venom of any creature. Anyone who shared a kiss with that child would eventually die. The fiancé's curse was called love, and because of it, the little girl was forbidden from ever sharing love with anyone. She spent her childhood locked away inside the noble family's mansion until the entire house eventually fell into ruin. Lim Lim finishes her story, stares coldly at Torque, and watches as the poison finally claims his life. After making sure he is dead, she quietly takes the payment from him and walks away, thinking that only one target remains. Sometime later, other people discover Torque's body. Bodwin arrives at the scene to investigate, confused about why dead bodies keep appearing one after another. First it was Hiruruku and his men, and now another unidentified victim has turned up. Just then, Il comes running toward him, loudly calling out Bodwin's name. Bodwin tells Il to calm down and catch his breath instead of exhausting himself by running. Il excitedly shouts that he has found the dark green steel formula. Hearing those words, Bodwin is completely stunned and asks if Il is really telling the truth. On the other hand, Limlim goes to see Shia and returns the money that rightfully belongs to her. However, Shia is completely numb and cannot say a single word. Limlim cannot blame her after everything she has been through. She gently explains that Il was the one who brought her back, so she is finally safe to return home. As they walk back, Shia anxiously asks if Tita is safe. She worries that if he is home alone and the debt collectors show up, he will not be able to protect himself. She urges Limlim to hurry. But the moment Limlim quietly tells her that Pita is dead, Shia freezes in shock. Unable to believe it, she breaks down in tears. Limlim silently hugs her, thinking about how Shia spent her whole life protecting her little brother. Now Pita is gone, and Shia has been left all alone. Even so, Limlim knows Shia has to keep living. If she ever wants to be truly free again, she must buy back her own freedom. Even her owner cannot simply release her, because a slave has to regain their freedom through the proper legal process. Very few slaves ever manage to become free citizens again, so Limlim knows the road ahead will be incredibly difficult. Still, she is relieved that Il was the one who bought Shia, because he is a genuinely kind person who would never treat her badly, even if she remains his slave for now. With everyone who threatened Shia finally gone, all that remains is for the last curtain to fall. Just then, Limlim hears someone calling Il's name. She suddenly realizes she forgot to tell Il that Shia had returned home. At the same time, Il arrives at Ward's workshop after bringing Bodwan with him by claiming he had found the secret behind dark green steel. Bodwan is confused about why Il dragged him all the way there while acting so mysterious. Once inside the workshop, Bodwan immediately asks where the dark green steel formula is. Il calmly begins explaining that everything started with the secret of dark green steel and Ward's murder. Bodwan nods, saying they already know Ward was killed. Il then reveals that the murderer was none other than Ward's own apprentice, Torque. Surprised, Bodwan asks who Torque is. Il smiles and asks if Bodwan really does not remember. He reminds him that Torque was the same man whose body was found in the alley earlier that day. Bodwan is shocked because he had no idea that the victim was Torque. Il then explains how Hiraruku manipulated Torque and how Torque eventually murdered his own master. Bodwan still cannot understand because Ward died inside a locked room where no one should have been able to reach him. Il patiently explains how Torque killed Ward by stabbing him through the small hole in the wall while Ward followed his usual routine. Bodwan is amazed that Il noticed such tiny details. Il continues by explaining that Hiraruku tried to force Ward's children to reveal the location of the formula. To pressure them, he created a fake debt and secretly had Torque use the mansion as collateral. Finally, Il asks Bodwan why he thinks Hiraruku was so desperate to get the dark green steel formula in the first place. Bodwan answers that it must have been because of the money. Il responds with a yes, but asks whether it isn't something strange, as Hiraruku asked Shia to sell the dark steel formula to the guild. If he meant selling it to the blacksmith guild, then there's nothing weird, because they would pay a decent price for it. But now, when all the countries around them are at war, a guy like Hiraruku could have taken offers from half a dozen countries and driven up the price of the dark steel formula as much as he wanted. Bodwan says that Hiraruku lives here in Santogan, so he understands these things. Il then asks that in front of such a massive profit, why would a greedy person like Hiraruku play it safe like that? Why would he only ask Shia to sell it to the guild unless there was some benefit in it for him, or maybe someone was putting him under pressure? Bodwan starts shouting, asking why Il is taking it so far and twisting everything like that. He asks whether Il doesn't have any pride as a guard. Il asks, pride, right? Then if they look at everything without letting emotions get in the way, someone must have given Hiraruku a reason, either profit to gain or consequences to fear if he didn't do those things. That's why Hiraruku was acting like that. Bodwan understands what Il is trying to say, and asks if Il is pointing out that someone is the mastermind behind everything Hiraruku did. Il responds with a yes, as the gain in this case is not money. Someone who already knew about Dark Steel would gain something from the guild getting its hands on the formula, And on top of that, someone was in a position to bring that proposal to Hiruruku. If he puts all the points together, then it narrows it down to only one person. The mastermind behind everything is none other than his own boss. So Il again asks whether that isn't true. Baudouin looks at Il with a fierce expression. Il says that he knows if this country gets dragged into war, then the guards will be the first ones to die. That's why Baudouin wanted to equip the guards with dark steel weapons, and there's nothing wrong with thinking like that. But in reality, Baudouin just doesn't want to face the war because he doesn't want to watch his own men die or see their families crying. And lastly, the most important thing is that Baudouin doesn't want to get blamed by others. So Il says that it isn't okay at all because he doesn't want to see Mia crying, and he can't sit back and forgive the person who drove Pita to his death. This time, looking the other way would be unbearable for him. Baudouin then asks what Il wants to prove. He says Il needs to grow up because ever since his real father, Gasper, died, Baudouin has been the one taking care of him like a father. If he hadn't taken Il in back then, Il would have been lying on the streets begging for money. So he asks whether Il is really thinking of going against the man who raised him like a father. Il apologizes to Baudouin because Baudouin has already stepped over the line. Moreover, killing a father isn't his first time, as he was the one who killed his own father, Gasper. So if he kills another father figure, that would make it 3 times for him. Hearing that, Baudouin starts laughing, saying that Il's bluff won't work this time because there's no way Il could have killed Gasper. Gasper was someone even Baudouin himself had a hard time fighting, so there's no way a dull guard like Il could ever kill Gasper. Baudouin also says that there's no chance Il has been hiding his true strength, because anyone can tell that Il is just a completely useless guard. Lastly, Baudouin says that if Il isn't going to take back his words, then he will have to punish him for bad-mouthing both him and his own father. Saying that, Baudouin pulls out his sword in front of Il and gets ready to strike him. After that, when Baudouin rushed toward Il to attack, Il calmly said that he had been struck by a nasty little curse, so he would make sure that Baudouin truly felt what it was like. But suddenly, as Baudouin got close to Il, he became confused about why Il wasn't even trying to dodge the attack. He slowly stopped himself and started wondering what Il was planning. If Il wasn't plotting something, then maybe he simply didn't have the skill or the guts to fight back. Suddenly, to Baudouin's shock, Il said that he was one of the assassins from the group called the Night Dwellers. So one of the country's biggest threats was standing right in front of him. Now, what was Baudouin going to do? Baudouin started laughing, saying that it was impossible for Il to be a Night Dweller. He then asked Il to speak properly. Yes, he had used Hiruruku to get the dark steel formula. But the ones who killed Ward and Pita were none other than Torque. So the real villain was Torque. In the end, Baudouin wasn't going to be blamed for anything because he hadn't done anything wrong himself. Il shouted at Baudouin to stop because it was just pathetic. Baudouin wasn't showing even a shred of conviction in his own actions. At the very end, he should at least show the same dignity he always had. Il even begged him not to lower his own value so much, because killing him wouldn't feel satisfying after that. Hearing those words, Baudouin realized that Il was truly determined to kill him. Lim Lim was completely stunned after hearing that this would be Il's 3rd time killing his own father. Before this, he had already killed both his real father and his foster father. She couldn't even imagine what kind of hell Il had gone through to become like this. Every assassin carried a curse and gained terrible power in exchange for losing something precious. But what Il had lost was simply too cruel. Lim Lim remembered her own past. Even though she had been locked inside a room, she always heard her father's tearful voice apologizing to her. But the day she learned that her father had died, it felt like her whole world had fallen apart. That was why she could never bring herself to kill her own father. Now she finally understood why Il's eyes had always looked so dull. Suddenly, to Lim Lim's even greater surprise, Shia quietly spoke beside her, saying that Il was a very pitiful person. If someone truly listened to him, it was easy to understand why he believed the world was filled with nothing but malice. His own life had been surrounded by people full of malice. But having to kill 3 different fathers was simply too heartbreaking. That's why someone had to teach Il what kindness and goodwill really meant. Shia was actually talking about herself, as she wanted to be the one to teach Il that. Hearing those words, Lim Lim smiled to herself, thinking that it wasn't a bad idea. This time, Shia had found someone who was even more broken than she was. Maybe that was why she wanted to protect his wounded heart herself. At that time, when Lim Lim tried to say something, Shia interrupted her, saying that Pita used to be such a mischievous child. But when she patiently taught him and cared for him, he grew into a good kid. Lim Lim nervously said that it was true, but she shouldn't compare Il with Pita, as it might be an insult to Pita. But Shia was sure that Pita and Il were the same. She believed Il was also just a child starving for love. Suddenly, both of them heard a strange sound coming from outside. They looked at each other in confusion, wondering what it was. Actually, the sound came from Baudouin's sword as he sliced a table clean in half with a single slash. He then said that after killing Il, he would take responsibility for finding a good husband for Nisha. Moreover, since Il would die in the line of duty, his family would receive a small pension. That's why he was going to make it quick so Il wouldn't have to suffer. At that time, Il silently stared at the dark steel blade with his dull eyes. It was the very thing that had caused all the tragedy that happened to Shia and her family. Moreover, it was the blade that had driven a man who cared so much about his soldiers completely mad. Then Baudouin rushed toward Il with full force to attack. Il quietly said that he was disappointed in him. Even while trying to kill him, Baudouin was still apologizing to Gasper. But suddenly, to Baudouin's shock, he was wounded out of nowhere and was cut down instead. Baudouin couldn't understand what had happened. He was sure that he had struck Il, so how had he been slashed instead? There was no one beside him or behind him. Moreover, Il hadn't even moved a single inch. So what had just happened? Il then explained that since it was Baudouin's last moment, he would teach him one final lesson. The curse placed upon him was the curse of swapping cause and effect, which meant that the attacker and the target switched places the moment an attack was made. So when Baudouin attacked Il, the result of the attack was swapped onto Baudouin instead. That was why Baudouin was the one who died. Il then thought that it was finally over. Now he only had to pretend to be terrified, run back to the guard station, and shout that the captain had been killed so no one would ever suspect him. But Il suddenly remembered something from a few moments earlier. When Baudouin had rushed toward him to strike his head, the moment their eyes met, Baudouin's sword had strangely changed direction and aimed for his chest instead. Just what had happened back then. Before Il could think any further, Lim Lim and Shia came out and said that it looked like the battle was finally over. Il smiled and agreed. Lim Lim then said that Il shouldn't be angry with them because they hadn't meant to spy on him. Il replied that it was fine. He knew that revealing his curse was dangerous, but it wouldn't change anything now. Lim Lim was surprised to see him acting so calmly. She had expected him to be much more depressed, but Il couldn't understand why she thought that. With tears in her eyes, Lim Lim said that it was because Il had just lost the man who was practically his father. Il lightly pinched her cheek and told her not to make such a foolish face. He said that the captain had been like family to him, but he had already given up on those feelings long ago. One day, his own family had tried to kill him, and on that same day, he had killed them back. From that day onward, everything had ended for him. That was why he had become known by the nickname Worst Illness. It was a curse that would trap him in endless loneliness forever. Hearing all of that, Lim Lim stared at Il and thought that he was just like her, as he was also forced to live with a lonely fate. Suddenly, a thought crossed her mind. If Il's ability reflected his enemy's attack, then if that was really true, it should also reflect poison. And even if her own poison bounced back at her, it couldn't kill her. That meant the bond she had given up on long ago, the thing called family that she had no choice but to abandon, might actually be possible with him. Lim Lim's heart started racing as she thought that maybe she could finally fall in love, be loved in return, have a child, and build a family of her own. But she quickly calmed herself down, thinking that there was no need to panic because she still needed to think it through properly. Il asked whether Lim Lim was okay or not. Lim Lim, completely flustered, hid her face and didn't answer at all. After calming herself down, she asked whether Il had been bluffing about the dark steel formula. Il replied with a no, as it wasn't a bluff. He explained that the door, the one that had come off its hinges and had a scratch on it, had actually been put back upside down. That's why no one noticed it before. But after looking closely, the scratch was probably made around Shia's height. Moreover, Ward had always said that when Pita grew taller than Shia, he would teach him the secret method. So if they broke the stone wall above that mark, they would easily find the dark steel formula there. After all, the formula had been hidden inside that spot the whole time. Il then handed the letter to Shia, telling her that she could either keep it as a treasure or sell it and use the money to buy back her freedom. Suddenly, to Il's shock, Shia tore the letter apart and awkwardly said that it somehow got ripped. Il immediately pointed out that it hadn't torn by accident, as Shia had ripped it apart with all her strength. After that, Shia smiled and called Il master, saying that she had just lost the only way to get the money. So now Il would have to take responsibility for her. At that time, Lim thought that Il had no idea there was already enough money to buy Shia's freedom. It was the money recovered from Torque, but Shia had hidden that fact because she wanted to remain Il's slave. Lim decided not to expose Shia's secret. So she pretended that she didn't know anything and asked Il to take good care of Shia from now on. Or was he planning to sell her again? Il got annoyed and said that he had to go to the guard station to report what had happened to Bodwan. So until he came back, Lim would have to look after Shia. After Il leaves the house, Shia thanks Lim for keeping quiet about the money. She then says that she just wants to make that boy, her master, happy. That's why, even if Lim ends up falling in love with her master too, she would be more than happy about it. Lim gets flustered and embarrassingly says that it's never going to happen. Shia laughs, saying that Lim doesn't have to hide it. Shia then says that from now on, she is going to stay by Il's side until the very end, and no one can change that. The scene then shifts to a few days later, where Il is lying on his bed, lost in thought. After the incident, the boss's family moved out of the guard housing, and Il still hadn't shown his face at the guard station. It wasn't because he was feeling sentimental. Rather, everyone had started treating him gently just because he had lost so many people in such a short time. Moreover, Shia was also acting very strangely, so the only person left for him to meet was Lim, but there was no way he was going to meet that girl when she was already wrapped up in her own troubles. While thinking, Il suddenly wonders what would happen if one day he had to fight his mother and Nisha to the death. Would he end up doing the same thing he did with Bodwan? Even so, he hopes that day comes as late as possible. Suddenly, just as he was lost in his thoughts, someone knocked on his door. When Il told them to come in, the door opened, and his sister Nisha immediately kicked him in the stomach, asking what he was planning to do with her. Il got confused and asked what Nisha was talking about. Nisha shouted, asking how Il could buy a girl and make her his slave. While she kept yelling at him, Il tried to calm her down, but more than anything, he wanted to know how on earth Nisha had found out about it. Suddenly, he noticed that Shia was also standing outside the room, so he nervously asked why Shia was there. Shia smiled and said that since her master never came to pick her up, she decided to come to him instead. Hearing that, Nisha became even more furious and started scolding Il again, asking what he was planning to do with Shia. Il angrily asked what Shia thought she was doing. Shia walked closer to Il and told him that as long as she was wearing the slave collar, no one could hurt or harm him in any way. In other words, she was the only person who could stay by his side. Hearing that, Il was completely stunned and didn't know what to say. Shia smiled once again and asked Il to take good care of her for a long time from now on. Il could only bow his head, wondering how on earth he had ended up in such a situation. After all those incidents, some time passed, and the rainy season arrived. Il wasn't happy at all because rainy days always got on his nerves. At that time, one of his fellow guard apprentices, Yuden, said that he didn't find it annoying at all because this was the season when the hydrangeas looked their best. He then added that another good thing about the rain was that anyone could sit in one place while taking shelter, and no one would find it suspicious. So, for stakeouts and spying, it was the perfect season. After that, they started talking about another friend, Monero. Since Monero was still nowhere to be seen, Il brought up Vice Captain Talion. After Bodwan's death, Talion had been acting as the captain, but once the new captain arrived, he would have to return to his old position. This time, they were all waiting for the captain and the team because they had to raid a place where a black market auction was being held. Talion was hoping that a successful raid like this would earn him enough credit to become the permanent captain. While they were talking, Talion arrived along with the main force of the Eastern Guards. He immediately asked about the back entrance. A veteran guard named Colt replied that there was only one entrance, so Talion ordered Colt to take Yuden and 5 others to seal that side. Meanwhile, the rest of them would storm the front entrance in 15 minutes. Everyone agreed. Inside the building, just as the auction was underway, both teams rushed in from their assigned positions and quickly captured most of the sellers and buyers. But the biggest shock came when they discovered that a little girl was also being auctioned. Talion immediately realized that child trafficking was involved as well. Among those arrested was a young noble. Il calmly sat there, watching everything unfold. Colt nervously commented that it looked like they had arrested a noble's son this time. Still, they would take him to the station first because someone from his family would probably get him released without much trouble. Il asked whether they should just take everyone back to the station now. Colt shook his head and explained that they had to wait because some royal property had been found among the seized goods, and the chief inspector would arrive to examine everything. A few minutes later, Chief Inspector Arthur arrived and spoke with Talion. When Talion mentioned the little girl, Arthur replied that they didn't need to worry about her because she wasn't part of the evidence. He said they could handle her however they wanted. Arthur even suggested taking her to a woman named Kurakara if they wanted someone trustworthy to look after her. The moment Talion heard Kurakara's name, he immediately refused, saying that it wouldn't be necessary because the guards would decide what to do with the girl themselves. Il silently cursed Inspector Arthur, thinking that he was truly an insufferable bastard. Yudin explained that Arthur was famous for never bowing to power or accepting bribes, which was why even the nobles were afraid of him. Il understood that Arthur was an incredibly stubborn man who never bent his principles. Even so, he still couldn't stand him at all. After all that, they returned to the East Gate Guard Corps station. Down in the underground cells, after locking up all the prisoners, they began questioning the little girl. First, they asked for her name. She quietly replied that her name was Neris. Seeing her silver hair and blue eyes, they immediately realized that she wasn't from their town and asked where she had come from. Neris explained that she had been living with her grandparents, but they were killed during the war. After that, she came to St. Torgan to look for her mother. However, the moment she arrived in town, she was kidnapped. Talion asked what her mother looked like so they could help search for her. Neris replied that her mother's name was Ridley, and she had the same silver hair and blue eyes. She was also 36 years old. Everyone noted down the details. Colt gently patted her head and told her not to worry because silver hair was rare, so finding her mother should be much easier. After her statement was written down, Talion ordered Il, Yudin, and Monero to search for her mother with Klinsmann's help. Until then, Colt would let Neris stay at his house. Colt was happy as well because he knew his wife would be delighted to look after Neris. Later, while Il was buying food at the market, the noble brat who had been arrested during the previous day's raid suddenly approached him. The young noble immediately asked about the silver-haired girl. Il calmly replied that he didn't know anything. Besides, the black market auction itself was illegal, so there was no reason to share any information. The noble sneered, saying Il was only talking like that because he didn't know who he was. He proudly introduced himself as Belcroche, the heir of House Cornet. Hearing the name, Il was surprised because House Cornet belonged to the head of the Public Safety Bureau, the organization that commanded all the guards. Still, Il couldn't understand why Belcroche was proudly throwing around his father's name despite being caught as a criminal. Even so, Il replied that he was only a guard apprentice and had no authority over such matters. If Belcroche wanted information about the girl, he should ask the higher officials instead. Belcroche laughed and admitted that he already had. However, even Talion had refused to tell him anything about the girl's whereabouts. Il then asked why Belcroche was so obsessed with a country girl when he could have almost anyone he wanted. Belcroche suddenly shouted that he wanted only that girl and no one else. As Belcroche stormed away, Il couldn't help wondering what he really wanted from her. She was just a little kid, so what kind of obsession was this? Was it love at first sight, or was there something else behind it? After Belcroche left, Yudin and Monero walked over to Il and asked how troublesome it had been dealing with him. They also suggested that they should report the whole conversation to Captain Talion. Il agreed. After that, the three of them started discussing whether it was love at first sight. Yudin quickly said that it was impossible because they could clearly tell from Belcroche's eyes that he wasn't in love at all. When they reported everything to Talion, he said that he had also refused to tell Belcroche anything about Neris. However, if Belcroche kept coming back again and again, it would become harder to keep refusing him forever. That was why Colt needed to be extra careful from now on. Talion also told Il, Yudin, and Monero to keep this matter secret because, besides the four of them, no one else knew that Neris was staying at Colt's house. Later, when Lord Cornell returned home, his son Belcroche immediately approached him and demanded that all the guards stationed at the eastern gate be dismissed. Cornell refused, saying that such a thing was impossible. Most of the captains were already afraid of him, and Baudouin had been the only one willing to follow his orders. But now Baudouin was dead, and if a new captain was appointed by the royal family, drawing unnecessary attention would only create more problems. Belcroche suddenly shouted that Nerys was the exact image of Ridley. That was why he was certain, and no matter what happened, he wanted to get his hands on her. After arguing with his son for a while, Corneille turned to his butler and said that he didn't care how much money it would cost. He wanted the girl's whereabouts at any price. According to him, guards were nothing more than gangsters in fancy uniforms, so someone would surely accept a bribe and reveal where Nerys was hiding. The butler nodded and told Corneille to leave everything to him. The scene then shifted to 2 weeks later. Il was thinking about how difficult it had become to find Nerys's mother because even after 2 weeks, they still hadn't found a single clue. As more time passed, he figured Belcroche must be getting even more desperate without Nerys. They then asked Klinsmann whether he had found any new information. Klinsmann replied that he had something to share, but before that, he brought up Monero, who hadn't shown up at all lately. Colt explained that Monero had resigned after hitting the jackpot at an illegal gambling den. Since he had suddenly become rich, he decided to move to another country and start a business there. Il didn't really believe that explanation, but he decided not to think too much about it. After that, they started talking about Colt and how kind he was. They also praised how well he had been taking care of Nerys. Still, Il knew that once they found her mother, they would have to tell Colt to let her go. He laughed to himself, thinking that Colt had always been a kind-hearted man, especially when it came to children. The scene then shifted 3 days later. Colt's house had been attacked. Both Colt and his wife were badly injured while trying to protect Nerys. However, despite their efforts, someone had managed to kidnap Nerys. The next morning, everyone heard that Colt's house had been attacked. They were shocked. The good news was that Colt and his wife weren't seriously injured. The bad news was that Nerys had been kidnapped during the attack. Everyone was confused, wondering why someone would suddenly target Nerys like that. Just then, a police officer arrived with new information. He said they had finally found a lead on Nerys's mother. According to a worker at a bar where Ridley had once worked, she had been hired as a live-in maid at a noble family's second residence in the royal capital. Talion happily thanked Klinsmann for the information. However, Il immediately realized why Nerys had been kidnapped and who was behind it. It could only have been Belcroche. Talion also became almost certain that the Corneille household was responsible, but without solid proof, there was nothing he could do. Il quietly walked away. On the way, he couldn't help thinking that Talion still wasn't fit to be a captain. Before doing anything else, Il decided to visit Colt in the hospital. There, he saw Colt's daughter, Dora, taking care of both her injured parents. When Il asked how they were doing, Dora suddenly burst into tears and asked why something like this had happened to her family. Il then asked whether she hated the people who had done this. Dora angrily shouted that there was no way she couldn't hate them. She would never forgive them. Il silently nodded and left the room. As he walked away, Il wondered what they could even do. There was no way ordinary guards could challenge someone as powerful as Lord Corneille. After Il left, the Silver Cat arrived at the hospital and met Dora. Seeing him, Dora became nervous and asked who he was. Without answering directly, the Silver Cat told her to walk down the 3rd road on Heartless Street. If she went there, she would find exactly what she was looking for. The next scene shifted to the Night Dweller's hideout, where Dora submitted her request. Kurikara accepted it without hesitation. After Dora left, the Silver Cat looked surprised and asked whether Kurikara was really going to accept the request because the payment was far too small for a mission like this. Kurikara replied that she would cover the remaining cost herself because there was something she couldn't ignore anymore. These days, no slave trader was willing to deal with the Corneille household because every slave sent there either died or suffered a terrible fate. On top of that, the Corneille family was already involved in the black market auction case. As a slave trader, she couldn't forgive what had happened to those slaves. Kurikara then asked whether the Silver Cat had gathered any information about Corneille and Belcroche. The Silver Cat replied that he had. Whenever Belcroche got a new slave, he locked himself inside the mansion and stayed there for days. At that very moment, Belcroche was inside the basement, which meant Nerys was most likely there with him. Hearing that, Kurikara became serious because she wanted to rescue Nerys no matter what. The problem was that the basement door was always locked, and the only other entrance was an air duct barely as wide as a person's wrist. Sneaking inside was almost impossible. The Silver Cat suggested that maybe it was finally time to call the S-rank assassin, Black of Judgment. Kurikara immediately refused. She firmly said that Black of Judgment would be the last assassin in the world she would assign to this mission. The Silver Cat then asked who she planned to send instead. Kurikara replied that she would summon the B-rank assassin, Creeper in the Dark, the A-rank assassin, Undying King, and the S-rank assassin, Worst. She ordered the Silver Cat to deliver the request to Undying King and Worst, while she would personally contact Creeper in the Dark. The Silver Cat agreed and left immediately. After he was gone, Kurikara turned toward the shadows and asked if he had heard everything. A man slowly stepped out of the darkness with a smile and replied that, of course, he had. The mysterious man was none other than the new B-rank assassin, Creeper in the Dark. And that is where the web of corruption goes even deeper. Il managed to avenge his friend and expose his own corrupt captain, but now the stakes are entirely different. A helpless little girl named Neris has been snatched away by a twisted noble family, and the underground slave market is about to face a total bloodbath, with the Night Dwellers assembling a squad of their most terrifying killers, including the Undying King, Il himself, and the mysterious new assassin, Creeper in the Dark. Things are about to get incredibly chaotic. What do you think the Twisted Cornet family is really planning to do with Neris? And how far do you think Il will go to clean up this city? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this recap and want to see the next part the second it drops, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single part. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.